So it was time to say farewell to Celia and point the Aston in the direction of the Channel and Le Mans. The maps were new, but this wasn't the first time we'd been to the south. That first visit was 2 years ago in 1951, for what was in fact only the third post-war race, which had seen the debut of the C-Type Jaguar. And whilst not belittling the pre-war efforts of the famous Bentley boys, the C-Type represented Britain's first serious professional challenge. In 1951, Stirling Moss had led for Jaguar before dropping out with failing oil pressure, and the same fate later befell the Leslie Johnson C-Type. Nevertheless, the two Peters, Messrs. Whitehead and Walker, had survived the onslaught of the Ferraris, the Cunninghams, and the Talbots to give Jaguar a famous victory. In 1953, we were staying at Mamers, 40 kilometers north of Le Mans, checking into the Hotel d'Espagne, and driving to Le Mans itself for coffee the next morning. There was time to watch the citizens of Le Mans go about their daily business and to ponder over last year's race. Jaguar had not been able to repeat their 1951 victory. They had been totally eclipsed for speed by the new Mercedes 300 SL, complete with those futuristic gull-wing doors. Alberto Ascari in a Ferrari had set the lap record before retiring, leaving Mercedes with a 1-2 victory. Leslie Johnson and Tommy Wisdom finished third in the Anglo-American Nash Healey. Aston's, having finished third in 1951, failed to get a single car to the finish. Out to the track around lunchtime, the first practice session having been the previous evening, and so the cars were tucked away in their garages, and the empty stands stood silently waiting for the thousands who would fill them in 2 days' time. No cars, but at least the painted nameplates above the pits whetted our appetites. Talbot, winners in 1950, Lancia, who've just won the Mille Miglia with their Jano-designed D20, the French Gordinis, Pegaso from Spain, Borgward, and also Porsche from Germany, Renault with their tiny 750 saloons, and from America, Briggs Cunningham. Fraser Nash are here, Allards also, and Alfa Romeo for the first time since before the war. Nash Healey hoping to repeat last year's successful third place. Austin Healey, Ferrari have 4 cars entered, and Bristol with a couple of curious coupés. The Jaguar C-Type is fitted with disc brakes for the first time. There's a single Oscar from Italy, and the new DB3S from Feltham. We were lunching at the Hippodrome. The best way to get there is to drive around the circuit. You could see the pit lane exit marked on the road as we cruised under the Dunlop Bridge. Down to the famous S's, and we see a Gordini getting in some unofficial practice. Tertre Rouge and the sandbanks are already in place. And there the famous line of poplar trees on the left, with not a single straw bale in sight. Then it's down the Mulsanne Straight, all 5 miles of it, the main Route Nationale to Tours. Halfway down, we stop for lunch at the Hippodrome restaurant. But lunch itself had to wait, as we weighed up the latest from the Fraser Nash factory. This is a Targa Florio model with a hard top. Production versions of this experimental car will be called Le Mans Coupés. The car is down to be driven by Wharton and Mitchell. After a satisfying lunch featuring the local speciality, Rillette de Mont, we carried on down the rest of the Mulsanne Straight, and a French racing blue Panhard with its extended tail sweeps by. And so to Mulsanne Corner. I wondered how many cars would go off into the sandbanks and lose precious minutes digging out. Then it was foot down again for the run back up to Indianapolis. Indianapolis is fast, taken in third at about 75 miles an hour. Then there's a short straight to the right-hander at Arnage. We stopped to watch for a while and rewarded with the sight of a little Gordini going through its paces. Back in the Aston, we were soon up to White House, Maison Blanche, where 3 Bentleys and other cars had their famous pile-up in 1927. Even 26 years on, there is nothing to stop one emulating Callingham and hitting the ditch and rolling into the adjoining fields. Race morning, and the car parks were already full. We'd had 2 peaceful days away down on the Loire, marvelling at the chateaux of Chenonceau and Amboise, high on the cliff above the river. After dinner on the Friday night, we'd watched final practice, and unfortunately the Spanish Pegaso had crashed and was too badly damaged to race. The starting order in the race is governed by engine capacity, and we found it nearly a quarter of a mile walk from the 750 Renaults up to the 5.5-litre Cunninghams at the head of the field. Ranked 4 and 5 came the Allard J2Rs. The Disco Volante, or Flying Saucer, is the new model from Alfa Romeo, with a lot expected of it. Mike Hawthorne was amongst the 8 Ferrari drivers, a list that included Alberto Ascari and Luigi Villoresi. We saw Jaguar's founder, William Lyons, on the pit counter, eager to see his C-types win again, and with no entry from Mercedes this year, it had to be on the cards. No doubt the product of wind tunnel testing at their Filton aeroplane base, the Bristol coupes looked very odd. With all the drivers togged up and ready to go. As the clock approaches the magic hour, a silence descends on Le Mans, only to be broken by 60 high-compression engines bursting into life and filling the place with a cacophony which will continue unbroken for 24 long hours. The Walters Fitch Cunningham got away first, leaving poor Briggs, who had so kindly come to my rescue and lent me some film of the early stages of the race, stranded. At the end of the first lap, Sidney Allard led, but not for long. He was soon overpowered by the Jaguars and Ferraris, and in fact retired on the 3rd lap with no oil pressure. With the race well underway, it was time to stock up on the Friteries and the bar, which was not to be ignored. After 3 hours, Tony Rolt led in the number 18 Jaguar. Moss had pitted with fuel feed problems, and Hawthorne's Ferrari was disqualified for topping up with brake fluid too early on. We watched the number 7 Talbot climb the hill from the Dunlop Bridge. A yellow C-type was entered by the Belgian Jaguar distributor for Laurent and de Tournecourt. Johnny Fitch and Phil Walters drove the number 2 Cunningham, which was the fastest car in the field. Most of the huge crowd at the comfort of our room at the Hotel d'Espagne, they rough it under canvassed among the pine trees. The 6 hours of darkness are very special at Le Mans. The crowd thins to a few hardy souls, but the noise goes on as the cars rocket up the hill between the pits and the grandstands. By now, Rolt and his partner Duncan Hamilton have built a 2-lap lead over the Ferrari of Ascari and Villoresi. Just after dawn on Sunday came tragedy. Tom Cole, the American, was tragically killed when his Ferrari crashed at White House Corner. At 5 in the morning, with 11 hours still to go, only Jaguar and Cunningham could claim to have all their cars still running. And there was no sign yet of the crowd refilling the stands. This part of France is notorious for its early mist on summer mornings, and until it's burnt away by the sun's heat, this makes driving down the Mulsanne at 150 miles an hour hazardous, to say the least. Briggs Cunningham was still running strongly in the car he was sharing with the bespectacled Bill Spear. The mist hung around for a long time, and yet the morning chill and the noise of passing race cars was not enough to waken some. We watched the leading C-type make an early morning pit stop. The car was running faultlessly, and the burly Hamilton took over from Tony Rolt for the next spell. The next arrival was the diminutive DB Panhard, a strong contender for the Index of Thermal Efficiency, a contest which measures fuel consumption against race times. The air filled with the breakfast aroma of fresh coffee, hot croissants and throat-burning gauloises to add variety to the existing odours of castrolane and burning rubber. Breakfast over, we returned to the Cunningham pit in time to see the coupe version in for a tyre change with its cut-off tail devised by the aerodynamicist Dr. Cam. This car was driven by Charles Moran and John Bennett and was destined to finish 10th. Briggs is a multi-millionaire who just loves European-style racing. He first appeared here in 1950 with a pair of Cadillac-powered cars. Since then, winning the Le Mans 24-hour race has become an obsession with him. For this year, he'd shipped over 17 tons of equipment from the United States, and the team was being run with military precision. And when he wasn't driving the car, Briggs was in the pit, keeping an eye on the lap times. Last year, Briggs had driven for 20 of the 24 hours. Pierre Levesque had attempted to drive the entire 1952 race by himself, but was so exhausted after 22.5 hours he had to retire as a danger to others as well as to himself. Now there's a rule that says drivers must not do more than 80 consecutive laps, or 18 hours in total. The number 2 car came in for some bodywork attention after Pitch had an altercation with the scenery. They'd been chasing the third-place Jaguar of Moss and Walker. They, in turn, lay behind the Villoresi Ascari Ferrari, and Hamilton, Rolt, still leading for Jaguar. Before any car can go back into the race, the plombeur has to come along and seal the fuel filler cap with a length of tape and a lead seal. There is always a risk of disqualification if the seal is broken before a certain number of laps are completed. By lunchtime, the paddock behind the pits was starting to resemble an Italian dead car park, with red cars everywhere, Ferraris, Alfas and Lancias, with the Villoresi Ascari car now out with clutch failure. Ferrari had just one car left, that of Marzotto. Jaguars were now first and second, Cunningham third, and another Jaguar fourth. Aston's too had lost all their team, which as an Aston owner and supporter was bad news to me, coming after a similar failure in 1952. As Duncan Hamilton sped on to victory, Jaguar began to realize it could be their race. The delayed Moss car in second was backing up. By this time, just 26 of the original 60 starters remained, and Cunningham still had a full house. The only other team with all their cars running was Jaguar. The new disc brakes on the C-types had certainly paved the way for a famous victory, just reward after their disappointment last year, when the new long-tail bodywork had caused overheating, allowing Mercedes to storm to victory. As 4 o'clock approaches, the crowd started to drift away from the sideshows to congregate in the tribune area for the finish. Some could sleep through it, but still the race ran on, and we watched the Cunningham Shark chase Moss through the S's. They even hold church services at Le Mans on the Sunday morning. Is the French passion for religion or motor racing, I wonder? Back in the Cunningham pit, we waited for the number 1 car. Briggs and co-driver Spear were due in for their last stop, watched over by their team. Bill Spear handed over to Briggs for the last spell. The lap chart showed that Cunningham held 3rd, 7th and 10th places. A brilliant result when you consider that their cars were mostly brute force, and they've seen off the best that the likes of Ferrari, Aston, Alfa and Lancia can offer. I glimpsed William Lyon through the crowd. What a result for him. But there was still tension. A few more laps to go, during which anything could happen, and so often does in motor racing. Just 1 hour to go, and the atmosphere at the South changes. The cars keep circulating. But out come the gendarmes to line the pit lane, always a sure sign that the finish is not far away. Two minutes to go, and Briggs's cameraman caught Tony Rolt overtaking the Moran Bennett Coupe Cunningham just after the Mulsanne turn. And then it was all over. Tony Rolt brought the winning C-Type over the line, the first car to win Le Mans at an average of over 100 miles an hour for the whole 24 hours. Behind him, the Shark came into third place, and Peter Walker in the second-placed C-Type. The tired and overworked Jaguar mechanics sat on the winning car for the victory parade to end a wonderful day for Jaguar. Phil Walters was in the highest-placed Cunningham and shook hands with everyone. The new Austin Healey 104s finished in line astern. This new model looked good to me. Then Briggs arrived with the 7th place number 1 car, and the team fell upon him as one. And there was room for more on the coupe, which was followed by the 2nd place Jaguar, Peter Walker now riding shotgun. And then the winners, with Duncan Hamilton now at the wheel. And so, after my 3rd Le Mans 24-hour race, to bed.